The strait that stopped the world. When the primary artery of global trade suddenly starts to choke, the patient is not just one region, it is the entire world economy. And today, that artery is the Strait of Hormuz, a narrow 33-kilometer wide waterway between Iran and Oman that carries roughly 1/5 of all seaborne oil traded on Earth. For decades, this strait has quietly functioned as the hidden control panel of globalization, determining how fast fuel reaches refineries, how cheap shipping remains, and how stable energy-driven markets stay. Then came the moment when Iran decided to turn geography into a weapon. Instead of simply raising tensions, Tehran activated its most powerful card, the ability to shut down the gate through which 20 million barrels of oil pass every single day. Locking the Strait of Hormuz was no longer a hypothetical threat. It became a full-blown, headline-breaking reality. A frozen sea of steel. If you were to look at a satellite map today, what you would see is not a flowing river of ships, but a frozen sea of steel. Data from maritime tracking agencies suggests that nearly 2,000 massive oil tankers, container vessels, and bulk carriers are now stuck in limbo, drifting in the Gulf and the northern Arabian Sea, unable to move forward without risking missile fire, drone strikes, or mines. These vessels are not just metal shells. They are floating warehouses of crude oil, finished goods, and essential supplies that keep factories, ports, and shops across the world on track. The psychological impact is just as dangerous as the physical one. The moment Iran blocked the Strait of Hormuz, oil prices surged toward $115 per barrel, insurance premiums for tanker routes skyrocketed, and shipping companies began rerouting voyages by thousands of nautical miles, adding days and sometimes weeks to delivery times. In a system built on precision and speed, every extra hour that oil and cargo spend stuck in uncertainty becomes another layer of inflation on food, fuel, and manufactured goods. But Hormuz is not acting alone. The Houthis in Yemen, aligned with Iran, have tightened their grip on another critical choke point, Bab el-Mandeb, the southern gateway to the Red Sea. With missiles and drones patrolling the skies above this narrow passage, the Red Sea has become a high-risk corridor, forcing many shipping lines to avoid the Suez Canal altogether. The result is a double blockade, one squeezing from the north and the other from the south. From crisis to counter-revolution. Faced with this kind of pressure, most powers would have scrambled for a military solution, more warships, more patrols, more strikes. But the world's major economic players chose a different path. Instead of relying solely on force, they decided to rewrite the map itself. If Iran's strength lies in holding a narrow strip of water hostage, then the global response is simple: bypass the hostage taker. That strategy has crystallized into three massive, long-term infrastructural projects that, once fully operational, could permanently weaken Iran's ability to use the Strait of Hormuz as a geopolitical lever. These are not short-term fixes. They are multi-decade gambles, backed by trillions of dollars in global capital. Let's look at each one. Project 1. The Hajar Mountains Bypass Canal. Hidden at the southern tip of the Gulf map is what many analysts are calling the Hormuz Bypass, a colossal waterway project cutting through Oman's Hajar Mountains, designed to offer an alternative route out of the Persian Gulf entirely. While the Strait of Hormuz snakes between Iran and Oman, this new canal would slice through Oman's Musandam Peninsula, directly connecting the Gulf with the Arabian Sea. The idea is brutally simple. Ships that would normally enter the Strait of Hormuz will instead be routed through a heavily guarded, mountain-tunneled canal, shielded from the reach of Iranian missiles and drones. The proposed length is around 32 kilometers, through some of the most rugged terrain in the Arabian Peninsula. Engineers estimate that somewhere around 400 million cubic meters of rock will need to be excavated, and the canal will be carved roughly 25 meters deep and 300 meters wide, just enough to fit the world's largest oil and container supertankers. Three massive lock systems, each about 400 meters long and 25 meters deep, will be installed to handle the differences in sea level between the Gulf and the Arabian Sea. The cost is staggering. Early estimates place the price tag somewhere between $100 and $300 billion, depending on how many security, monitoring, and redundancy layers are added. If successfully built, This canal could cut Iran's leverage over the Strait of Hormuz by up to 80%. Instead of sailing through the narrow, missile-prone channel, tankers will slip into a secure, tunnel-like corridor where drones and small boats find it extremely hard to operate. Oman and the UAE, which are expected to be the primary beneficiaries, could rise from regional players to global logistics hubs rivaling the Suez Canal in strategic importance. China, which has long relied on the Strait of Hormuz for much of its imported oil, will likely push its Belt and Road initiative to integrate this new corridor into its wider network, turning the Gulf into a new pivot point for East-West trade. For the global economy, the drop in risk premiums alone could smooth out the wild swings in oil prices that have haunted markets for decades. In short, the Hajar Mountains Canal is not just about moving oil. It is about building a new choke point that is controlled by commerce, not by confrontation. Project 2. The Iraq-Turkey Development Road. If the first project is about water, the second is about steel and concrete. Across the map, stretching from the bottom of the Gulf to the heart of Europe, a massive land corridor is being planned, the Iraq-Turkey Development Road. This 1,200-kilometer corridor will begin at Iraq's newly expanded Grand Fa port on the Persian Gulf and run the entire length of the country, cutting through the deserts of southern and central Iraq before entering Turkey at the border. From there, the route will connect to the Turkish port of Mersin on the Mediterranean, and then extend deeper into Europe through the Kapakule land, crossing into Bulgaria, effectively plugging Gulf-bound cargo into the arteries of the European Union. This is not just a highway. It is a combined highway and rail network designed to handle both trucks and long-haul freight trains loaded with containers, oil, and bulk cargo. Official planning documents suggest that, once fully operational, the development road could move around 7.5 million containers per day and approximately 33 million tons of bulk cargo annually from the Gulf to Europe. That is enough capacity to offset a significant share of the maritime traffic that currently passes through the Strait of Hormuz and the Red Sea. The price tag is far more modest than the Hajar Canal, roughly $17 billion, spread across multiple phases. What makes this project truly groundbreaking is the political backing behind it. Historic financing agreements have already been signed between Turkey, Iraq, Qatar, and the United Arab Emirates, creating a massive joint investment pool to fast-track construction. The strategic logic is clear. Instead of gambling with vulnerable sea routes, cargo that leaves the Persian Gulf will be transferred directly to rail wagons and long-haul trucks at Grand Fa port. From there, it will move through a secure overland corridor that missiles, drones, and mines cannot easily reach. Iran's intimidating naval presence in the Strait of Hormuz becomes far less relevant when the tankers are replaced by trains and convoys moving through Iraq and Turkey. For Turkey, the prize is enormous. It will leap from being a regional transit country to becoming the central logistics hub between Asia and Europe. For Iraq, still recovering from years of war and sanctions, the development road could signal a complete economic rebirth, transforming the country into a global transit corridor rather than a battlefield. And for Europe, the development road offers something rare: a secure overland pipeline for energy and cargo that bypasses both the Strait of Hormuz and the increasingly dangerous Red Sea. Project 3. The Haifa Gulf Energy Corridor. While the first two projects are already gaining momentum, the third is the most politically explosive and the most potentially transformative. In the middle of the Gulf crisis, Israel has proposed a bold new energy corridor: pipelines from the Gulf states to the port of Haifa on the Mediterranean. This plan envisions a network of massive oil and gas pipelines stretching from Saudi Arabia and potentially other Gulf producers across the Arabian Desert all the way to Israel's Mediterranean coast. Once in Haifa, the oil can be loaded onto tankers that sail directly to Europe, bypassing the Strait of Hormuz, the Red Sea, and even the Suez Canal. On the surface, this looks like a purely economic proposal. Gulf oil reaches European markets faster, safer, and without the risk of being held hostage in a narrow waterway. But the geopolitical implications are far deeper. By turning Haifa into a major energy transit hub, Israel positions itself not as a regional pariah, but as a key logistical partner between the Gulf and Europe. For Iran, this is a direct blow to its maritime blockade strategy. Pipelines buried underground or shielded by patrols are far harder to attack with missiles or drones than slow-moving tankers on the open sea. Iran's famous "I'll close Hormuz" card becomes significantly less powerful when a major share of Gulf oil can now flow through steel veins in the desert instead of through the strait. For Saudi Arabia and the UAE, the benefits are equally clear. Instead of relying on a single choke point that is vulnerable to Iranian coercion, they gain a diversified export route that strengthens their autonomy in global energy markets. The political challenges are enormous. Reconciling historical rivalries, security concerns, and regional sensitivities will not be easy. But the desperation caused by the Hormuz blockade is rapidly turning the impossible into the necessary. The pipeline's already running. Even as these three mega-projects are being discussed, the Gulf's two largest oil producers have already switched to their existing emergency routes. Saudi Arabia has activated its east-west Petroline pipeline, a 1,200-kilometer artery that stretches from the giant oil fields in the east of the kingdom all the way to the Red Sea port of Yanbu in the west. This line can carry up to 7 million barrels of crude per day, and analysts estimate that about 5 million barrels are already being exported via Yanbu, avoiding the Strait of Hormuz entirely. Similarly, the United Arab Emirates is using the Habshan-Fujairah pipeline, which moves around 1.5 million barrels of oil per day from inland fields directly to the Gulf port of Fujairah, completely bypassing the Strait of Hormuz. When combined with the Petroline and Fujairah routes, these pipelines can already divert roughly 9 million barrels of oil per day away from Iranian reach. That is not enough to fully replace the 20 million barrels that normally pass through Hormuz, but it is enough to prevent the global economy from collapsing into a full-scale energy crisis. In a world where oil prices are hovering near $115 per barrel and insurance premiums have skyrocketed, these pipelines are worth their weight in gold. They are the first line of defense against runaway inflation, showing that when the seas are weaponized, the land can still be trusted. Iran's dangerous countergame. None of this means that Iran will sit back and watch its greatest strategic card be erased. Tehran has already demonstrated a mastery of asymmetric warfare using drones, missiles, mines, and proxies to control the seas without risking a full-scale naval war. If the Hajar Canal, the Development Road, or the Haifa pipeline become operational, Iran may shift its focus from the open sea to the new corridors of steel and concrete. Long-range suicide drones, cyber attacks on pipeline control systems, and sabotage operations carried out through proxy forces could all be used to threaten these new arteries of trade. Yet the global response is already clear. The world has stopped treating choke points as permanent fixtures of power and started treating them as temporary vulnerabilities that can be engineered around. The golden age of maritime trade, where a few narrow straits dictated the fate of empires, is giving way to an age of corridors where tunnels, railroads, and pipelines are the real rulers of global supply chains. A new map of power. For centuries, geography dictated who controlled the world. Empires rose by dominating places like Gibraltar, Suez, Malacca, and Hormuz, the narrow choke points that forced ships to pass through their hands. The Strait of Hormuz was the last of these great natural choke points to be turned into a political weapon. But now, something fundamental is changing. Engineering and capital are beginning to overpower rock and water. The Hajar Mountains Canal, the Iraq-Turkey Development Road, and the Haifa Gulf Pipeline are not just infrastructure projects. They are geopolitical coups designed to break the old rules of power. If all three come to life, the Strait of Hormuz will no longer be the undisputed master of the Gulf. It will become one of several options, not the only gate. The 2,000 ships currently trapped in the Gulf waters may well become the final image of the old world before the new age of corridors, tunnels, and pipelines takes over. Global capital does not like uncertainty. It does not tolerate blackmail. And when a single choke point threatens to drain trillions of dollars, the world responds with budgets worth hundreds,